in his Bhakti Sutras. He says, first, Mahat Kripa Eva. That is through the grace of great souls only you feel it. Now, they may not come and tell you, but they may just look at you and know that somewhere in your heart you have the capacity to love, and they might just trigger it. So, Mahat Kripa Eva, through the grace of great souls only. Number two, Bhagavat Kripa Lashat, or a little of divine grace. How does divine grace comes? By our actions or karma yoga, the way we take care of other people, how selfless we are, how much we are thinking of something higher. Then the third one is you work on your discipleship. That's what Swami Satyananda used to say. When people would ask him how to get a good guru, or how should we get a guru, what should we do to get a guru, he said, don't bother about the guru. You work on your discipleship and you yearn for a guru, somebody who will come and help you go up. Because gurus, we cannot measure gurutvam because we don't know, we don't have the equipment. So many masters have been stoned or whipped or crucified because of our foolishness. When I say our foolishness, I'm talking about the general population, people who don't know the higher qualities, and because of material preoccupation. So Swamiji used to say, when a disciple is ready, the guru will appear. Whoever that person is, the sadhaka knows it is Narayana in that particular form. Now remember, I use the word Narayana because that is how Narada says it, because Narada is a Narayana Bhakta. Later on, when we go to the Shiva Bhakti, then they will talk about Shiva. And it doesn't matter what name you give him, whether you call him Narayana or Shiva or Allah or Jehovah or the Father, he's still the same one supreme soul. So in Kathopanishad, it said that he, that is the divine, who chooses him, the disciple, to him alone he reveals. That is, he has to choose the devotee. He can give you discipleship, but devotion is a different thing altogether. It is the divine power that makes the disciple seek, and the guru look to teach. Divine grace alone creates a communication, and ultimately it creates a communion between the teacher and the taught. So the grace of the guru, Narada says, is a grace of the Lord himself. Now, all that stands between the disciple and the divine is the ego of the disciple. Krishna says in the Gita about external and internal guidance will always reach a person who is a devotee. So he says, O Kaunteya, that is son of Kunti, declare from the housetops that my devotee will never come to ruin, because somewhere I'll keep protecting my devotee. So either you have a continuous companionship directly with a true teacher, or indirectly with sacred books and scriptures of the old days. Both of them will give you a feeling of wanting to be a devotee. It will make you selfless. It will make you help other people. Now you can see during this corona situation, how many people in India are reaching out and helping each other. People, whether they have it or not, they are simply helping people. This is called devotion. You don't have to sit in a temple and pray to God that you see your Ishtadevata alone. Because if you truly loved the Ishtadevata, you'll find the Ishtadevata in every person. So these are the aids to bhakti, as I told you, through the grace of great souls alone, a little of the divine grace. You're working on your discipleship and yearning for a guru. Then trusting the guru and not bringing your ego into the situation. For example, the ego is fed by misconceptions plus body-mind identification. So they say one has to surrender that ego. You don't surrender your house, your family, your um, career. That's not what they mean. They are talking about the situation where you give up your own ideas, your misconceptions of something. That is what is called the ego. Now, these are the and continuous companionship with a true teacher or with sacred books and scriptures. Now, what are the obstacles in developing bhakti? First one they say is dussangha, bad company. Because companionship of evil materialistic people create more vasanas, because of which the mind gets agitated. See, if you go to a company of satsang with great rishis or other devotees, you will get positive vasanas because they are all talking about how much they are grateful for the great things they have got in life. But if you go to evil materialistic people, they will make you confused and then they will put in your mind negative influences, and this negative influences gets your mind agitated because you suddenly get confused. Should I do this? Should I do that? Am I on the right track? Does God really exist? If he is existing, why is there problems in life? All this sort of thing. So you will realize that if you go along with people who are completely sensual, uh, sense oriented, that is the Indriya oriented life people, the sense gratification, that is, you want to eat good food, you want to listen to good music, you want to listen to speak, people speak nice things to you. None of that is wrong. But if you are continuously looking for somebody to always keep giving you positive pats and say how wonderful you are, how wonderful, you have heard in politics they have a inner coterie, no? And some people think that in ashrams also there are inner coteries. Somebody is close to the guru, somebody is not so close, which is completely a misconception because every disciple is close to the guru, and the guru does not is not partial in any way. He gives each person, if you accept somebody as a guru, he gives each person the job that will help them to complete their karma and then move towards the Parabrahman. So when you dissipate your prana in all the sense gratification, even if it is wanting somebody to constantly say nice things to you, what a wonderful person you are, how holy you are, how religious you are, without you I cannot handle the religious life. Even things like that, if you start getting interested in that, you dissipate your prana. Sometimes people will say, everything is God, you say, so evil also is a play of the divine. That's what some people will say. Evil is not the play of the divine. Evil is a distortion of the divine. And it happens because of maladjustment of the body and the mind. Remember when we were talking of Jnana Yoga, we said body and mind must be aligned. What your mind thinks the body has to do, and it should be conducive to the body's health. And it has to work together. If there is a maladjustment between the karmendriyas, jnanendriyas, and the mind, then you won't see the divine, you will see a distortion of the divine. So at that time they say, avoid the atmosphere of disharmony and destruction. If you, until you are established in a very firm level of bhakti, unless you know you are protected and you have Mahavishwasa, no matter what, I will not change my um, trust in the divine. Unless you have reached that point, they say, if you see that somebody is causing disturbance to your mind, somebody is causing destruction of your own um, moving towards something higher, then avoid that situation or that person completely and totally. Then they say, why? Because that person or that situation is karanatvat. That's what Narada says. That is, that person or the situation becomes a cause of kama, krodha, moha. Your memory becomes forgotten, smriti vibhramaha, buddhinashaha. That is, your you are not able to discriminate. Somebody may be saying nice things to you, but he may be a very bad person trying to even put you down and sit in your place. But you may not know because you think, oh, he's so nice to me, he's saying such nice things. So it uh, disturbs your viveka. And when your viveka goes, sarvanasha, everything about you gets destroyed. Even your happiness is destroyed, everything. And these people, ime, he says, these people or these circumstances, even though they appear like a ripple in the beginning, it's so small, it even looks harmless, and you think I can handle it. But fed by the evil company, it becomes like a tidal wave. It is no more a ripple. So you have to be careful that you don't get constantly in the company of negative people, which will increase your negativity because these are just vibrations. So when you become negative like that and you go on with the same sort of people, it grows into such an invincible force, and it drives the seeker and all the virtues he has got all his lifetime into total destruction. Therefore, they say you have to be alert. Detect anything that is negative and weed it out early. Don't wait for it to become big. Satsang helps because you will know the truth, and knowing the truth, you will be alert. Then he says, who crosses Maya? Because all this is because of Maya in one sense. You are looking at things, not looking at the truth. You are looking at it through your own illusions. You know, if you feel that you're not good enough, somebody comes and tells you you're a wonderful person, you start feeling good. So you're looking at it only through your own need to feel that that person is praising me. That means I must be really wonderful. This could be an illusion. So he says, who crosses this Maya? He says, Kattarati Maya. Who crosses? Who really crosses Maya? He says, he who gives up craving for sense or objects. He doesn't say he who gives up eating or um, enjoying sense objects. No, he doesn't say that. You can enjoy your good food, you can enjoy a good movie, you can enjoy the nature and its beauty, but you must not crave for it. You mustn't get addicted. That's what he's saying. Sangam tyajati, giving up the craving for sense objects. Then Mahanubhavam sevate, serving great devotees. That is, wherever you see somebody who is selfless and helping, go and serve that person. Help that person to help. Then you will get a little of that benefit also. You put yourself second there. Nirmama bhavati, no sense of mind. You don't say, for example, you go out and somebody, you go out and help in the corona situation. Then you make a photograph and you say, let's see how wonderfully I'm helping. So that doesn't become um, choiceless. You're doing it because you want to feel that what a wonderful person I am. I'm so philanthropic and I must be really holy and spiritual. So what he's saying, nirmama, don't have a sense of mine. This is my pride. This is my gratitude. Leave the mind to the side. Then he says, Maya exists not because of the sense objects. Remember this very clearly. It exists not because of the sense organs, but because of our craving for them. Because we falsely feel that it will give us never-ending pleasure. So sometimes we say, no, we'll have a big bank account and we think that it will give us whatever we want, we can buy. We'll always be convenient and everything will be luxurious. Nothing can happen to us. No virus come near us. Income tax won't come near us. And we can go on accumulating, and we become a craving person. Now, what happens to the prana that was used to hang on to this craving, to these sense organs? Once you give up the craving, that much prana is free. So you enjoy your life, but when you don't crave for it, when you're not addicted only to the good things, you that much of prana which was hanging on to that sense objects is free for you. And when it frees itself, you offer it in the service of something higher. So what do you mean by offering it in the service? Service means seva. What do you mean by doing seva to the guru? Some people think sitting and massaging his legs is seva. Some people think giving him his favorite thing that he says he likes, that is seva. They're saying no. He says not just taking care of his comforts, but more important, become a vehicle for the guru, become a tool, a yantra for his energy. He has become a guru because the divine has said, here is this man who's a great devotee. He is working not for himself, but for all of creation because he sees me, the divine, in all of creation. Now, when you become a vehicle or a yantra for the guru's energy, you are living life in tune with the guru. When you live life in tune with the guru, then the mind energy will never be kept idle. I remember when Swamiji used to give the um, wedding gifts to the villagers, the poor people in Munger at that time. He would ask some of us to come and take it from his hands and then hand it over to the person, the specific person. And at one time he said, you know, my astrologer, when he was born, his mother showed his kundali, his horoscope, and they said he will have 100 daughters whom he will get married to, married off, like that. So he said, I'm a sannyasi, where do I have daughters? But the horoscope also has to be made correct, because if I hadn't taken sannyas, maybe this would have happened. So he said, I will give these wedding gifts, that is the Stridhan, to 100 girls in that locality. And when we went and he would ask us to take it from his hands and give it, he said, see, you're also sharing in my karma, that the good karma that I'm doing to fulfill the needs of so many people. So that is what the gurus do for you. They help you to use your mind instead of keeping it idle and sitting and thinking, now what should I do? They will always give you something to do, which will in one way help you finish your karma. Secondly, it will help you get chitta shuddhi. Thirdly, most important, it will give you bhakti, because the selfless giving and helping is a manifestation of bhakti on the outside. Now, if you leave your mind open and sit and wait, what happens is the mind will, when it is empty, it'll grab something else and get attached to it, because it is the nature of the mind to get attached. It was not that you were attached to, say, gulab jamun. If gulab jamun is gone away from the market, you will go to rasagulla. If rasagulla is completely gone away from the market, you will go to something else, because the mind exists by its attachment. When your attachment, your craving goes off, automatically the sense objects also become less important to you. Then the third thing they say is a purified mind. When they say purified, a mind that is not caught up with addictions, by cravings, not sitting with negativity, not getting misconceptions of things, then that purified mind loses its sense of mamatvam. Mamatvam means I am doing this. This is my effort. I'm so tired because I'm working so much for somebody there. Because that purified mind loses the mamatvam, because it understands Naham karta, guru karta hi kevalam. It's a fact. That is, we are not doing anything. Bhagavan, through the guru, makes us do something. When we do something good and selfless, it is he using our hands, using our mouths. So no one is actually bound by possessions. It is our mental slavery to them that binds us. That's what you have to remember. So don't feel that if you leave everything and go away and sit in a hermitage or in the Himalayas, your chitta will become pure. No. What they are saying is, don't get too attached to anything. Don't crave for it. Then they say, Narada says, keep yourself in a solitary place and go within yourself. So, what do they mean by solitary place? It doesn't mean you have to go into a lockdown somewhere. It doesn't mean you have to go to the Himalayas. Where is your solitary place? Your ekanta is within yourself. You can stand in a crowd. Sometimes you have seen when you're very sad or upset by something, you may be sitting with a crowd of people talking about something pleasant. You will also be joining with them because you have to keep up your social mask persona role, but inside you will be constantly thinking of the difficulty you have. So that inside is where you are solitary, alone. Then nish trigunyaha. I told you this is jnana yoga. Free yourself from the three gunas. Don't be tamasic, that is being negative. Don't be rajasic, always wanting only your way, controlling people. And even go beyond sattva. That is, you identify with your witness. Once you identify with your witness, you are watching the three gunas and how they are dancing within your body. When you feel low someday, you get up in the morning and you say, I don't feel like getting up. I'm not feeling good. Something I feel lousy about something. Don't identify with that and say, what has happened to me? Look at it and say, oh, so this is tamas doing its visit to my house this morning. So be a witness, and that witness will help you go beyond the gunas. Then such a person renounces, this is for who crosses Maya. Such a person renounces all anxieties of acquiring something and maintaining it. Because that person knows that whatever you acquire, you're not going to take anything with you when you go. When you come, you don't bring anything with you. So when you actually realize it, you don't get worried when something goes away because you think, okay, it was not mine. I'm going without it. So why am I getting so anxious? So Swami Satyananda used to say, you sit alone with yourself when you sit for meditation. Because he would explain it by saying, when you're sitting in meditation and you're thinking about or you're visualizing the divine or saying the nama of the divine, at that point, you don't have an identity. You're not a mother, you're not a daughter, you're not a Brahmin, you're not a Hindu, you're not a Muslim. All these identities belong to the mind. Here you are just a being, a disciple or a devotee who is on a journey towards the Paramatma. Then he says, Unmulayati, that is, pull out the slavery and the bondage to the world, your slavery to the world, not your attraction of friendliness. Pull out your slavery to the world and pull it out right the root of it, right from the beginning. See where it starts and remove it at that point. Don't wait till it becomes a huge tree, then it is very difficult to pull it out. This is your surrendering to the world. So he says, everybody knows what surrender is. Instead of surrendering to the world, turn it inside and surrender to the Paramatma. So then he says, such a person renounces the fruit of the action. As Krishna says, he says that is that you have a right to action, but you don't have a right to the fruit of the action. Why? Because it's not because you do something that the fruit comes. There are many, many things that are involved with bringing the fruit. So don't worry about it, he says. Give up not the activities, but the sense of doership. That is, don't say, I am doing it. The bhakta works with a sense of complete surrender to the Lord. So that is why when we finish doing any puja or havan, we always say Sarvam Krishnarpanam Astu. That is, I'm giving everything to him. So somebody who is able to do that is actually a true sannyasin. Then you have to have a continuous deep devotion for something higher and give up everything else. The vanity or expectation of anything like this goes away. And whatever you do it for Bhagavat Kainkarya Rupam, to be able to do something out of a deep love for the divine, and such a deep love that doesn't expect any conditions. It's a unconditional love, Narada says. And he says, Satarati, Satarati, Sa Lokam Tarayati. Having perfected such a love, he crosses Maya. And not only does he cross, such a person alone is a master who can help others to cross also. So this is what bhakti is. And just to come to we can go on talking about bhakti till the end of the year, but let us go to the story itself. So in the story, they say that the Gopikas, who were very young children, they were less than 11 years old. When the Rasa Krida was danced, they all had to be 11 years old. That is before the hormones start acting and they are innocent. So these Gopikas are sung about by a devotee called Andal. Andal in the south was like Mirabai of the north. And she would say in Tamil, Narayanane namakku parai taruvan. That is, Narayana alone will give us the parai. Parai means what? It means a drum. That doesn't mean that Krishna literally gives them a drum. The drum is a proclamation. In the old days, before you had TVs and any announcement, people would beat the drum and alert you. People will come out and listen. And if the king was going to war, the drum will alert you. If the king has levied a tax, that will be alerted by a drum beating. So the drum here is a proclamation. It means that Krishna or Narayana, as she says, gives them the tools for going higher. The Upanishads and the Vedas say many things, among which the most important theme proclaimed, which is drummed into us, is the Pranava, the Omkar. When you do sadhana on the Omkar, the Pranava mantra, the rishis say that you will understand the highest. And so here is the Omkar, which has three aksharas, A, U, Ma. A is the Paramatma. Ma is the Jivatma like us, aspiring to reach the feet of the Paramatma without even understanding what it is. And U is his Shakti, his dynamic energy that is called as Shri or Mahalakshmi or Mahamaya. She is the one who joins the Jivatma, the Ma with the A. She joins the Jivatma with the Paramatma. How does she join them? Because she is Prakriti, she is the universe. She creates. She manifests the world as Mahamaya. He creates through her all the difficulties in our lives. And these difficulties have to bring us to the point that in our own we cannot handle some things. Even with our best effort, we are not omnipotent. Whatever delusions of omnipotence have propped up in our life, we think we can do anything in the world. It becomes useless when you face certain difficulties that bring us to a state of helplessness. And that is what Mahalakshmi, Mahamaya does. And his Mahamaya is called Shri. So in the story, the Gopikas are doing a particular sadhana in which they have been asked to do it because there was a drought at that time. And they said, who will teach them the sadhana? Only two people know it, Nanda Gopa and his son Krishna. And they say not Nanda Gopa because he has become old. What does that mean? Nanda Gopa would walk around with a stick to, because he saw that Krishna was all the time being attacked by negative forces, Rakshasas and things as a child. So he would walk around with a stick to hit all the negative forces so that they won't come near his dear child. So when they say that they don't want uh, uh, Nanda Gopa, they mean that when they say he's old, the stick is not necessary. They mean that the Gopikas now do not have anything negative near them. They do not need a stick to chase away negativity because they are so pure and with Chitta Shuddhi. Now, when the sadhana that they were doing, when they were doing the sadhana with full devotion, they were not doing it alone. Somebody else was doing sadhana with them. And this was Shri or Mahalakshmi or Mahamaya. That is to say, if you do a sadhana with complete devotion, the whole of Prakriti becomes your friend. Sometimes we feel when we are in the world, circumstances prevent us from doing good. There is no place in the world for good people. Enemies are keeping us away from being spiritual. And Maya is telling us it's not at all like that. If you have that Parama Bhakti, that complete Mahavishwasa, the entire universe, which is Maya, becomes your friend. And the universe tries to push you higher and higher, because when one person moves higher, and because we are all one, then if one person rises, the whole of Prakriti will move upwards. So in other words, she herself, Mahamaya, is doing the Katyayani Vrata along with the Gopikas. So what do? They finish the Vrata, and the day before the last day of the sadhana comes, they are so happy because they are feeling very hot. When you do intense sadhana, sometimes you might feel very hot, like when you have a fever. So they go to the cool water of the Yamuna and they splash into it. And how do they splash into it? They take off all their clothes and they jump into the water and they are having a refreshing bath. So they are not. Andal says, don't let us jump into the waters in an irresponsible manner. The waters here refer to the waters of consciousness. It is the waters of Krishna, Mahavishnu, Narayana. So the divine that we are instructed, the waters of consciousness, that is to enjoy the bliss of being with the divine, they said, don't do it irresponsibly. And why are they saying it that? Because when the girls jump in, they had taken off all their clothes and they had a delightful time in the waters. Then it's almost time to come. I sent you the video, but there is a little difference in the video. They show them as little older women. That is the movie. But you've got to understand this situation. These girls finish bathing. They look around to see the clothes so that they can come and wear them. Then they can't find them. Now looking up, they say Krishna sitting on top of a tree and all the clothes are hanging from the branches. So he tells them, why did you go into that river without your clothes? That was such a big mistake, he says. And on top of that, he tells them that the only way they can get past the mistake is with his help, no other way. Now, if you understand the story superficially, we'll miss the teaching. It is something much deeper. The clothes are what the Atma is clad with. The Atma has 5 clothes. The Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha. Kosha means a covering. The Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha. You know this. The Annamaya Kosha is the physical body. Manomaya Kosha, the thoughts come to that part of you. Pranamaya Kosha, which has the life force. Vijnanamaya Kosha, the Buddhi, the Viveka faculty, Anandamaya Kosha, the bliss of the divine. Now, what has happened to the girls? They were so carried away with so much bliss, so much happiness of succeeding in that sadhana that they did. They took off all the clothes and jumped into the water. And Krishna is telling them something very important. He says, don't get into something you're not prepared for. That's what he means. Keep your clothes, don't keep your clothes on like this. Don't take it off and jump naked, because the waters that they have entered are the spiritual waters of consciousness, not the Yamuna flowing. This is the Sushumna. And before jumping into the Sushumna, one must be completely prepared before taking the leap. That is why you will find that often a guru will counsel a student not to rush, because we want to hurry up and go there. You say, Swamiji, when are we getting this mantra? Swamiji, I've said it 10 times, I've said it 500 times, I've said it 1 lakh. Why nothing is happening? And the guru will say, just wait, learn to be patient. So when something is big is going to happen, sometimes people will say they feel Kundalini moving, lights coming, and all this sort of thing they expect. They say at that time, we are told to do, before any major function, what do? We put Rangoli on the threshold and we do puja to the threshold, because we say Lakshmi is sitting there. If you do not pay attention to that threshold, they will say Narsimha can come and tear you to pieces. In other words, when you're crossing from one state of consciousness to the other, that is, they were in the material world, even though they were pure, and now they are wanting to be with Krishna consciousness, wanting to be with the supreme consciousness, and they remove all their clothes, that is, they remove all the koshas, and they just jump in without even waiting for the guru or Paramatma to say that wait, don't be in a rush. That is, when we are crossing, we must ask ourselves whether we are truly prepared, because some high energy of that sort can burn us up. It's like using nuclear energy to use a bulb, to put a bulb. Even the transformer will burst. So you have to see, what are you prepared to give up for this? How far will I go for the next step? So lack of preparation for crossing this threshold shows up in daily life. You take a course, you don't like the course, after some time you leave it, you get married, you're not happy, you leave it. We find failure many times due to small quarrels. Somebody was telling me yesterday that a marriage broke up within a few days because the girl did not know how to make a dosa properly. Instead of breaking up the marriage, if they had had any sense, they could have paid 400 rupees and got an online masala dosa from somewhere, and they would have kept the relationship. You see, so when you go into any relationship, even ordinary relationships, you have to prepare yourself for going into it. Then if you cross that threshold without paying attention to it, then how are you going to have a relationship with the divine, which is the whole universe? If you can't have a relationship with somebody next to you. Swamiji used to say, Swami Satyananda, if you cannot love your colleague who's working with you in the ashram, whom you can see, how do you think you're going to love the divine who you can't even see? So, for example, when you want to get married, you don't ask, what am I going to get? You have to ask yourself, what do I bring into this marriage? Or when I go to college, or when I go to a spiritual teacher, not what can the teacher give me because I paid the fees. No. You see, what do I bring into this situation? Do I bring my humility? That is why you have when you have a convocation, you get a shawl in which it is said that Vidyam Dadati Vinayam. That is, the more you learn, the more you know, the more humble you become, because you realize you really don't know much. Only, what do they say? Empty vessels make the most noise. A filled vessel does not make noise. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say, when you go to a wedding feast, first you'll hear people greeting each other, talking, making smacking sounds, saying wonderful food, and maybe burping. But by the end of the food, when they come to the kheer, nobody will be talking. They will just be enjoying the food. So when you're really filled, really full, then you don't make a noise about it. The noise is made by people who are half baked. So they were so carried away, these gopikas, that they jumped into the water. And Krishna's solution to the dilemma, telling them, now only I can save you. Come out of the water naked with your hands above your head to take your clothing. Now you will find in the words of mystics in every scripture, whether it's Christian, Islamic, references to coming naked before God. It means that you do not bring your persona, your mask, in front of God. That is, the divine Paramatma is sitting in your heart. He knows what you are. When somebody comes to our house like a servant, or when it is a family elder, or somebody says the prime minister is coming, we put on a certain role. If your boss is coming to the house, you're very courteous. If your servant is coming and you're irritated, you might yell at the servant. If your kids are there, there is another mask you put on. So they are saying, with God, you need not put on any masks at all. You go naked before Him. That is, you don't identify with your Annamaya Kosha, physical body, the prana, the mind. Your mind may say anything. It can say bad things, good things, disturbing things. Don't identify with it. Only identify with the divine that you are trying to be in front of. So he says there is no need for any mask. Come naked, he says. Don't have all these masks. Don't even have concepts about what is bhakti, what is para bhakti, what is liberation. He says, simply come to here, come to me. I'm taking care of you. I'm here. You don't even have to think, because I am thinking for you. So Krishna says this with his hands in Anjali Mudra. It's the greatest mudra. And how old is Krishna at that time? 5 years old. So it's not that there was anything sexual about it. Now, when Krishna tells the Gopikas to come out naked with their hands up, he knows at that time that they have recognized him as Parabrahman. And he is giving them the guidance to go higher, to give up the last vestiges of the personal ego, that the personal identity that holds them back, thinking, I must do it like this only. If I don't do it like this, if I don't put chandan on my forehead, I'm not being religious enough. If I put lipstick, I'm not religious enough. He says, don't bother about all that. Simply surrender. Say, here I am. Take me as I am. I'm the only one who can help you. Then when you reach such a level, he says, remember that he alone is your sustaining force. Nobody else and nothing else can help you. So when the Gopikas emerge from the water fully naked in the eyes of God, without shame, embarrassment, or feeling modest to cover their nakedness, which we all of us will do if we go back, he gives them back their clothes and he tells them, I know how pure you are. If they had not been pure, they would not have come out like that. And in doing so, their vrakta was with the full fruits came. They wanted him as the Pati, the Lord. Now, what is the meaning of Pati? People say they wanted to get married to him. Pati means husband. No. Pataha means protect. The person to protect means Pataha. So when you say Pati, that they want him to protect them. Vishnu or Narayana is called Patim Vishwasya, he who protects the entire universe. So then he tells them that they will enjoy being with him on the Rasalila time, coming nights. Why is it called Rasalila? Because the Upanishad says Raso vai saha. Rasa means the essence. You can have many, many flavors. You can have the flavor of sugar, flavor of jaggery, the flavor of rasagulla is different from the flavor of kheer, payasam. Different things have different flavors, but the sugar aspect is the essence of it. So in the whole universe, there are many, many flavors. And he says, and the Upanishad says, he alone is the essence. The divine alone is the essence. So raso vaisaha. Therefore, they say rasa leela is the ability to enjoy life in the waters of consciousness without getting hurt and without jumping into it, without taking the Paramatma along with you to protect you. So, whenever a guru gives you a blessing to do something, always remember that he is taking over your job. If he tells you, I'm blessing you, you will come back successful in your examinations, it means that he has taken over your examinations in which you're going to come out, because he is going to write through your hands. He is going to speak through your mouth. So when you have Mahavishwasa, you cannot do anything wrong there, because you have surrendered to a guru or surrendered to the higher consciousness, and that takes over and does your work for you. That is the Mahavishwasam that you have to have. And you must teach your children also this, because sometimes, if you see a friend taking drugs, for example, and you remain silent, thinking, I'm not taking drugs, so it's okay, he's my friend, I will not talk about him. This is called the Karna syndrome. When Duryodhana was doing all sorts of bad things, Karna doesn't say anything, because he says, he has given me so much affection. He's the first one who gave me so much dignity in public, so I am loyal to him. And what does he mean by loyalty? Even if he does bad, even if he does evil, if he comes to a bad end, I will stand by him firmly, even if he dies in the attempt. That is not being a friend. That is a misconception of thinking that because I am a friend, I have to agree with everything that the other person does. When we do that, we are giving up on our duty to the universe, because we must never forget that the universe brought us here for a specific purpose. And what is that purpose? To go back to our source and to help other souls to go back to the source, towards Paramatma. So when you understand that and when you remember that, then you start becoming a recipient of Parama Bhakti. Then any situation that happens, whether it's good or bad or difficult, whatever happens, you tell yourself, this is he is doing it. If I make a mistake, that's okay, because he knows me better than even I know myself. He knows that I will make a mistake, and still he has accepted me. When I went to see Swamiji, Swami Satyananda, the first time, I sat there, and because I'm so used to working I had a career outside, I said, Swamiji, shall I give you my bio data? Because I thought he must know that I'm coming from such and such a background, because that's what we do everywhere when we go for a job or a favor or anything. So I said, Swamiji, shall I give you my bio data? So he laughed and he said, you are here because you are meant to be here. There is no need for any of that thing. For me, it was a completely novel situation, because somebody just accepted me as I was. And that, I think, gave me the further Mahavishwasam, that if he could accept me without even knowing me, then knowing me, how much more compassionate he would be. So that is what every guru tells the disciple, whether you hear it from his mouth or not. If he gives you mantra diksha, if you feel a love in your heart, if you feel grateful for anything in life, remember that that comes from the grace of Bhagavan, that comes from Narayana, and it comes from your guru who has um, gone into the higher state of consciousness, who has merged with Paramatma, and the Paramatma uses this guru as a yantra through whom he brings out his energy. And the guru is looking to give you that same energy so that you can move more rapidly along this path towards Narayana. So that is what the Gopikas did. If I were to talk to you about the conversation between Krishna and the Gopikas and the Rasa Leela, it would take at least 2 hours. And we, maybe some other time, if you're interested and you have the time, we can do it. But today we won't do any of that. It's 5 more minutes. If you have any question, you can ask. Any question you can ask.
Swamiji, one question has come,
Yeah.
how to erase the past bad karmas in our life?
Yeah. When your guru gives you a diksha, whatever the diksha is, it may not be a formal diksha. You are maybe sitting and he might just turn and look at you. That may be a diksha. When a guru gives you a diksha, he has removed all your past karmas. That is what you have to understand. What can happen is the karma is a momentum of an action, no? So something that is left over, something small, it will come in a small way and it will go away in a small way. Provided you have that, you see the guru as a guru and not just as a professor or a teacher who's giving you knowledge. Somebody who gives you diksha means he has taken over your karmas and you don't have to worry about that anymore. He will lead you through life, and if you follow what he says in spirit, not necessarily just by in the letter, in spirit, what is he trying to do, what is he trying to teach me, and you follow it slowly, slowly, you'll find that your karmas get less and less, and you will see how you're protected on every level in different ways. That is something that I have seen on a personal level, so I can talk about it. So you will be protected. That's why they say when a guru gives diksha, he gives raksha also. It is a fact. We don't see it in the beginning because we get worried about small things. But as you go along, you will see the transformation that is happening inside you, that is happening around you, and that is happening perhaps in your family or wherever it is that you are moving around. And you will see how you're being protected even without your asking for it, sometimes without even knowing that you might be in a dangerous situation. You will still be protected. And that's how your karma slowly become less. See, if a guru gives you a mantra, you're going to be chanting that mantra every day, no? So when you chant that mantra, it creates chitta shuddhi. Slowly, 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 your life itself becomes different. And then slowly with the chitta shuddhi, you get ekagrata. Ekagrata gives you a certain vibration. With that vibration, he's able to work through you and reduce your karmas.
Thank you so much. The next question. How do we know when we have to fight against injustice and when we have to endure?
Okay. First of all, if you are a sannyasi, if you do not fight against anything, you have ahimsa. So you raise your own goodness by doing your japa and whatever you're doing, and something unjust will not come near you. If it comes, it's only because there is some trace of ahamkar within us. That ahamkar may be also, I have to fight injustice. That also may be. You just say, no, the guru is fighting it. I just got to be in that place. Remember how Krishna tells Arjuna in the Kurukshetra war. Imagine Arjuna has come to the war because his wife was disrobed in public. She was a queen. His brother Bhima, they tried to kill him on 1 or 2 occasions. They tried to kill all the 5 brothers right in the presence of his grandfather, Dhritarashtra, in the presence of Bhishma, who was the great grandsire, the Drona, his guru, and nobody was able to put a stop to it. So you can imagine the anger with which he came to stop injustice, to the war. But what did Krishna say? Krishna said, you can't run away. You can't say, Arjuna said, when suddenly he saw all the family members, he said, my God, how can I do this? So he said, why not, aren't we doing a sin by killing other people? And if we behave like them, then what is the difference between us and them? Not that, he says we, as if Krishna asked him to come to the battlefield. They had decided, Krishna tried to bring peace, it did not happen. But in spite of that, Krishna comes as the charioteer. And what does he say? He said, you can't run away because you have brought, this is your karma. You have brought it up to this level by not doing anything in the beginning. And so you got to know, you have to take the consequence of it, but I will make it easy for you because I will stand with you. So he says, you fight. Don't think that you're fighting. Don't think you're killing them. I'm the one who's killing them, meaning I'm time, he says. That person's time has come to die in such a way because they have made a mistake there. Bhishma had to lie down on that on the bed of arrows because when they asked, when Draupadi was being disrobed, she asks Bhishma in the whole court, she says, is it right on Yudhishthira's part to use me as a pawn in the game? And what does Bhishma do? He doesn't go to the spirit of the situation and say, no, you can't disrobe this woman. She's a woman, and on top of that, she's a queen. How can you do that in public? He doesn't say that. He starts talking to her about the legalities. No, he says the Shastra says the wife belongs to her husband up till such and such a time, and therefore. So you know what is right and wrong. Everybody knows, but if you don't have the guts to stand up and fight with the injustice, then you will have to take the consequence. And that is why Bhishma took the consequence. But if you trust in something higher and you say, this is injustice, I have to open my mouth and say it. You don't have to go and catch a thief and beat him up. There are law enforcing people. You inform the police, because we have a certain system in this country. You inform the people concerned, and they will do what they need to do. You can help as a volunteer. If even that doesn't help because people are corrupt and you are helpless, pray to God, do your job, say, God, make me an instrument of this situation. Tell me what to do. And you will know what you need to do will happen for you. Either you go in front there and you have to fight that injustice, or you sit like Ramana Maharshi somewhere and you just keep doing your japa, and somebody else will fight on your behalf, because we are all not separate islands. We are all one consciousness. So if you want to fight injustice, first we have to look within and see how much we have contributed to it by keeping quiet or by encouraging the negativity. And so we are also part of that crime that is happening. So these situations will always give us a chance to sit and contemplate, am I partly responsible for this? Say, for example, this girl who was raped in Calcutta, somewhere there, Delhi or Calcutta, I forget her name. Now these people was hanged, Nirbhaya. How much was society? It was not only those 3 or 4 people who raped her. The society raped her, because how many mothers bring up their sons to respect women? How many husbands respect their wives in front of their children so the children learn a model? How many wives respect their husbands in front of their children so that the children model and learn that you don't hurt another woman? How many women are able to tell their children not to hurt other people, not just women? You can hurt a man also. You can, raping a woman is the same as insulting or humiliating a man. You're literally castrating the man of his manhood. This is what somebody in America told me once, a man. So it is, how much have you done to prevent himsa within yourself to other people? How much have you done in your home to teach your children? So if we have not done that fully, then we are all part of that blame of what happened to Nirbhaya, for example. So How do we say we are fighting injustice? Because then you have to fight with yourself also. So that's why they say don't judge. Just get into the system, do what you can, whatever you're capable of doing. What you are not capable of doing, and sometimes we feel very helpless and we say, oh God, I wish I could do something. Simply say that straight to God Himself. God, please do something. It's bothering me, it's disturbing me. And then what does He do? He'll send you one coronavirus, and everybody has to sit and think about what they are doing, because you're not just raping a woman or only in as in Nirbhaya, you're raping the earth, Bhumi Devi. You're raping the Sagara, the rivers. You're raping the Panchamahabhutas, the Vayu. So we have to, before we turn around and say somebody else is unjust, we have to see how much we are contributing. Some of my students from US once came here, and we had gone to some temple town, and there were some children there. One of the children came near the women, and the ladies took out money from the purse and they started giving it to these children. I said, don't give it. I said, they said, no, we feel so sorry. We want to do something for the poor and hungry in India. I said, don't give them money. You're making them beggars. You want to do something for the poor and hungry in India or anywhere in the world, you stop wasting food in your country. When you start throwing away the food, this is injustice, no? So that is what we have to think very, very deeply on the spiritual path. Otherwise, you can always join the army and you can go to the LOC and do something. That's different. Those people are really doing something against injustice. But if we are where we are, we have to look at how we can enrich the consciousness of this place, starting with ourselves. And believe me, if you enrich yourself, if you sustain yourself with the dharma and you stay with the truth, satyam, you will win. No matter where and when or what, you will certainly win, because you will bring goodness into your life and you will soon start getting people who are good around you, and goodness will thrive in the world. Okay?
Last question, Swamiji. Last question, Swamiji.
Okay, okay.
Uh,
Okay.
how we will know the consequences of karma and how it comes back?
Okay, you just got to see if something comes to you, something, you just sit and say, have I done anything to deserve this? That is, for example, somebody is nasty to me today, say, for example, I'll say, have I done something to get this nastiness? But I've always been nice to that person, so why is he nasty? Say, for example, you're trying to help a child by giving charity constantly. Say, reservation itself. Reservation for the people who do not, the idea was people who did not have access to education, we should give them a chance to get education, which is the fair thing to do. Now then, when you start using this reservation as a vote bank, for example, now you are misusing the purpose for which you started it itself. Then what happens? The people to whom you start giving it, they are not really grateful. They start feeling as if you have made them into beggars, and somewhere they will resent it. So they will say, something like, oh, you had it, so you gave it. Because you have it, you're able to give it. So what's so great about it? That is what sometimes people at that level will tell you. Not everybody will always feel grateful, because they know that even though you're coming and doing it with a great fanfare, when you're doing something, most often you're doing it in your own self-interest. You want to either get votes or you want to be seen as a very benevolent person. Those people who do good without being in the limelight, they are the true givers. So when you think like this, you will realize, how did I earn this negativity? How did I earn this karma? Because I did something like this. So you go back. It helps you to look at yourself. It is only a way, not so that you blame yourself and you feel guilty. Not for that. You don't have to feel guilty. You just look at it where you made a mistake and you say, oh, I never realized like this. From next time onwards, I will not do it. You learn from your experience. Some 10-15 years ago, if you remember, children used to come asking for Ganapati Habba money. And one day I felt sorry because I thought this child, and I thought how nice he is being so interested in Ganapati Habba, so spiritually interested. So I gave him some money. And those were days before I came to the ashram 35 years ago. And one day I was coming back from my work and I came, and I saw this boy and two other boys. He was what? He was 8 or 7, 8, that age. He was standing behind a house. So I thought, well, this is this boy who came and took money from me. Let me go and see. So I just went and saw behind the house, and he was sitting there and smoking beedies with his friend. And I asked myself, is this what I gave him money for? I am responsible for what he is doing today. After that, I never gave a child. I don't give a child money. If I have to give a beggar something, I give him food. Because I don't want to be responsible for creating some bad karma. So like this, we go on looking, and we find we have done something that is not very sensible, not common sense. We change it. That's all it is. That is how God comes into your life and making you refined and searching for goodness. He doesn't think, oh, that day she was a crook, that day she was an alcoholic. God never thinks such things. It is only that we, with our own mind, we use this judgment and all that, and we think about after things. I just want to read out to you because this flew down just to my hand. It was sitting somewhere along with my books. And this is from Swami Satyananda. The way of God is such. God protects like a servant. He who, worships him, the Lord of infinite plenitude and of the universe, has no pride. He does not even see how scandalous was the past life of the devotee. He looks not at his conduct or anything, nor at his qualification, nor his status, not prosperity, not learning. All that he sees is the devotion. Then also to such an extent that he becomes a slave of slaves and applies himself silently to his service. That's what we have to remember. So these are all ways for us to learn to be better human beings, basically. Okay?
Okay, Swamiji.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Swamiji.
So now next one is Monday, no?
Yes, Monday, Swamiji.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Hari Om. That's all.
Hari Om, Swamiji. Hari Om.
Hari Om Swami.
Hari Om Swami.
Hari Om. Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om. Thank you
Hari
for
Om
being
Swamiji,
there.
thank you.
Hari Om. Hari Om. Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om
Hari Om.
Swamiji.
Hari Om.